Through the years, I've worked with over 30,000 clients one-on-one, and at some point, I became a top 5% earner in my field. Now, what that experience taught me was what it feels like when you don't have rapport with a client and how to easily get rapport with almost anyone. So if that sounds good to you, let's go. Hi folks, my name is Chris Solomay, and on this channel I help people with personal and career development. If you like that sort of stuff, subscribe. If you don't. For a long time, making offerings to clients one-on-one felt really uncomfortable. And by offerings, I mean selling. It was only through ambition, continuous learning, and way too much time that I ended up getting to that place as a top earner. To give you some perspective on what that looked like, as a hairstylist, I was able to do about $2 million at my chair in service and retail dollars. Now, the industry standard in that same time period is less than half of that number. So I think even of being a hairstylist as a selling job, because through the years I learned that the real money was made through additional services and products that you offered on top of whatever the appointment was that you had. And this is really the same in pretty much every sales type position. Now, years later, as a videographer, in a pretty short amount of time, I've gone from struggling videographer who, did work for free to doing projects of upwards of $30,000. Now, what that experience has taught me is that whether you're selling a high ticket item for thousands of dollars or a low ticket item, the process is really exactly the same. Yes, higher ticket items can take a little more time, but as you'll see, really in the end, it's all the same process. So all these years later, I no longer really believe that you actually sell anybody anything. I believe that people either potential buyers or they're not. Your product is either for them or it's not. And yes, there are some sleazy salesmen out there that say they can talk anyone into anything, but that's not really the goal of somebody in business, and that's definitely not what I'm going to cover in this video. Anyway, once I figured this out, I was able to start to implement some of, what people would call best practices in a way that got real results, for me and my income at my chair and in my salon. The purpose of this video is to share the exact process that I use with a client, whether I'm dealing with somebody on a higher ticket project or if I'm just selling something small in a one-on-one situation, maybe a lower ticket commodity item. The steps I'll cover in this video are really, number one, understanding and setting your intention, gaining that rapport, and then number three, understanding relevant communication. And this includes questions, listening, and follow-up questions, and then of course, eventually an offer. Let's talk rapport, first impressions, and repeat impressions. Yep, I just said that, repeat impressions. So what does that mean? If you're in a process and it's going to be longer than just one meeting, let's say you're selling something high ticket, this means that you want to show up the same way or even better as the process moves forward. So let's first get the common knowns out of the way. Yes, you should look happy to be there, or at least interested. Yes, you should be dressed appropriately for whatever industry you're in. For some of you, it's going to be a suit and tie, and others of you, maybe if you're in a more groovy or creative industry, it could be a groovy outfit. But the reality is you want to be appropriate. Yes, you should learn how to make eye contact with another human being. Yes, you should learn a handshake properly. None of this COVID bullshit. And yes, of course, you should believe that you're able to do the work. And this means that you've built up your skills and you belong at the table, right? That doesn't mean that you don't take risks sometime. We all have to go out on a limb, but you're taking calculated risks because you know you can do the work for the client. And finally, I should say, it's also a very helpful skill to learn to read people, like their body language and facial expressions. And there are plenty of videos on YouTube out there that you can learn that. The steps that I want to really talk about, again, are intention, rapport, and relevant communication. So let's talk about intention. Intention comes through when you're building rapport. So what is rapport? Great question. Rapport is the relationship that you have with one another. So that said, your first job is building rapport, and you want to gain as much trust of that person as you can fast, and you do this by understanding that person as fast as possible. And you want to let them see that you do understand them. Now, this can happen in a lot of different ways, such as just an understanding glance or a nod, Or maybe a one-liner comment that lets the person know, like, you know how they're feeling. You might say something like, I know it's been a crazy week. And what you're doing in this moment is just relating to that person. You're building rapport. Here's an example of this. I recently did a project for a major hair care brand. I was familiar with the brand, but I was meeting this new marketing director for the first time. I happened to know that she would be attending an event that I was also at. So that day, I purposefully wore a jacket, which I don't always do, but I know that marketing directors tend to be a little bit more sophisticated than I am. So on a break, I happened to be at the snack table at the same time that she was, and I walked up to her and I asked, "Hey, are you Jessica?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "I thought that might be you. Jessica, I'm Chris Solomay. Just wanted to say hello and congratulations on the new position." Then I asked her, "How you enjoying it so far?" She explained it was fun and there was a lot to learn because she was coming from a totally different industry. And I, of course, asked her, what industry was that? And then I just let her explain. After that, I simply paid a quick compliment to her coworkers and said that I believe that her skill set will work perfectly with that team and she'll be a great complement to it. This let her know that I was familiar with them without me having to give her my resume. After that, I simply said, "Well, nice meeting you," and I walked off. You see, I know that marketing directors are busy, and I wasn't trying to bog her time down or monopolize her time, and it would not win brownie points if I stood there and tried to pepper her with questions or even told her about my big past as a professional. By keeping it short and sweet, I was purposefully respecting her time, knowing that we would eventually be on a meeting for a work project together. So the next time we did meet, it was on a Zoom in which they were looking for a campaign to produce some video for a launch. How did I continue to build that rapport on that Zoom? Well, I came prepared. First, with a few questions, and questions are a great way to build rapport, but only when they're genuine. Then I asked a few follow-up questions that were necessary and relevant, right? Relevant means that they pertain to the person who you're building rapport with, not that they pertain to you. So after the team shared enough information, I made a bold statement. I shared that I believe that this campaign might be the most important one that they had coming this year, and I had some facts to back it up. I wanted to let them know that I was vested in the success of this launch. Now, the words were important, but they weren't necessarily the most important thing that mattered. What mattered is, I made this move specifically to show her that my approach to this project would be different from the assets that they had traditionally made. I wanted her to know that for better or for worse, if we worked together, it was not going to be a par for the course type of thing, that I wanted to share completely different ideas. See, because I believe it's your job to make your case after you have all the information, and then it's the client's job or right to decide whether they like your ideas or not. Now, throughout the project, every time we met, I showed up prepared, and the track record was continued to build on confidence and competence, which is something that people like when they're working with people. And that was my exact goal. Now, let's talk about relevant communication. Again, in this video, we're talking specifically to situations where you're speaking with the client. This could be in person, or it can be on a Zoom. Honestly, it doesn't matter. Relevant communication means that you get all the information that you need to make an informed decision to make an offering to this person. Your offering should help them achieve their goal. I also keep in mind that people are inundated with communication today. So whether it's text, social media, direct messages, whatever, keep the communication appropriate and don't waste your client's time. So let's say you're keeping the conversation going in an email setting. It might mean that you're mirroring the style of emails that your client sends. For instance, if they send one-liners, it means that they're looking for an efficient response. So give them one. Now, this doesn't mean that you get lazy. Make sure your email looks a little cleaner than theirs and it's a little more thorough. But again, if somebody sends you a one-liner, they're telling you, hey, I value my time. This is where I'll circle back to intention for a minute. The reason why Jessica jumped on board so fast, because she could see and feel that I really wanted to be helpful. I guess I should add in one small detail. The part I didn't mention is that the quote that I gave her was far and above the budget that she had thought she would have for this series. We negotiated a little, but in the end, we ended up with a price that was very worthwhile for me, and the project absolutely crushed their goals. So it was definitely a win-win. Now, through the years, before every client interaction, I ask myself, what can I do for this person in front of me? Not what can I get from them? Asking this question sets your mind frame in the right mindset for the conversation. It sets you up to help you solve your client's problem. Now, this is how I use intention, and even if this feels a little hokey to you, I would say give this a shot. Next time you have a big client meeting, say to yourself, what do I want for this person? What can my service bring them? I promise you will be amazed in your results. P.S. This also works great in your personal life as well. Maybe the next time you're going to go meet a friend or your brother or sister that you have a tough communication with, ask yourself, what do I want for this person? Before I share with you how and when I ask questions, I want to know, is this video helpful so far? Do you have trouble building rapport with people like one-on-one in person? I know it's gone so online now that I see people having trouble with real-life interactions. I would love to have a real-life interaction with you in comments. So if you're learning something or you have a question, leave it in comments below. I'd love to get back with you on that. Last but not least, let's talk about questions. Specifically, how and what questions I ask in order to continue building rapport throughout the entire process of the sale. And remember, a great client is a lifetime client, so you're always doing this. Before I ever ask a question, I like to set the pace of the conversation. I call it taking the reins. And I do this even if someone else has done a lead-in, like perhaps on a Zoom meeting, and of course, in person. So what I do is I restate the intention of what we're here for. And then I ask permission to ask a few questions by saying, is it okay if I ask a few questions? Imagine that. Very difficult, right? So the exact questions might vary, but there are some types of questions that stay consistent throughout the conversation. So here are the 5 types of questions that I ask. Why questions, what questions, how questions, when questions, and who questions. So what questions might sound something like, my guess is you might already have some thoughts in mind for what specifically you're looking for. Would you mind sharing them with me? Or what are the top 2 or 3 details of this campaign that you really want me to know? Or what measurables will make you know that this campaign is a total success? Is it sales, brand, awareness, engagement? What is the timeline? Now, every time you ask a question, allow the person time to answer. And sometimes I like to say, pause longer than you feel comfortable. You will be amazed at what will happen after a pregnant pause. So now let's talk about how questions. How do you see this playing out? Or how soon do we need to get this done? When questions. This could be, when should we follow up next? Or when were you thinking about shooting this project? Or were you thinking about doing that today? Or when are you hoping to have this by? When is the best time for us to get this done? When do you need that quote? Who questions could be, who will be responsible to take this piece of the project? Or who is the best person for me to contact? Who will I be working with on this project? Who will be the point person? After I feel like I've asked questions, I'm satisfied, I always like to ask these couple final questions. Number 1, is there anything else that you feel is important to add? And number 2, what questions do you have for me? Now, depending on the situation, what happens next could be an immediate sale in which you would simply ask, would you like my professional recommendations for this project? Or should we talk about money now? If you're in a one-on-one sale, could I ring that up for you? Or it could be a next step question if there's more steps that are going to happen. That's a final sale option. But if it's a next step question, it could sound something like, what are our next steps? Or would it be okay if I shared some thoughts on next steps? From there, we either make the sale or we make the follow-up agreement, in which case we continue building rapport with proper follow-up processes. That's all for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to build rapport with most people. If it was helpful, please type helpful in comments below and hit that thumbs up. Of course, it helps the channel grow and it helps me get videos like these in front of people who need them. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.